Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, today we delve into the unfiltered war experiences through the personal diary of a young Imperial Guardsman. These entries, a first-hand account of life at the forefront of the Imperium's endless battles, offer us a rare glimpse into the psyche of a soldier freshly plucked from his mundane life and thrust into the vortex of interstellar warfare. Our focus centers on a recruit, Hamel Augustine. His story resonates with the timeless narrative of youth and innocence lost in conflict. His writings, preserved amidst the chaos of war, serve as a poignant reminder of the human element often overshadowed by the grandeur and scale of the battles that define the Astra Militarum's relentless campaigns. As we explore these diary entries, let us remember the fragility and resilience of the human spirit, the truths of war, and the personal sacrifices made in the name of the Emperor. Please join me as we step into the boots of this guardsman, experiencing through his eyes the reality of life on the front lines. The fears, the camaraderie, the struggles, and the fleeting moments of humanity that shine through the grim darkness of the far future.
The Valkyrie to the front chugs along, and I am tucked in my seat, both nervous and exhilarated. The days of training are behind us, 2 weeks tucked into a ship, training in the bays. It gets boring. So does the food. It's the real deal now, the real test. I can hardly believe my luck. I get to serve. No more field ploughing for me, trading in the plough for the gun. Folks back home won't believe the stories when I get back. It's a chance now to show everyone what the people of Hilarion are made of. My dear mother, she always believed there was more for me beyond our fields. And now, with my haversack packed with essentials, my mug, knife, notebook and pocket ticker. Clipped to my belt are the tools of war, pockets stuffed with ammunition, and my slightly leaky water bottle. Standard issue, the veterans call it. It's a heavy load to bear, often making me wonder how I'm supposed to move, let alone fight with all this weight. But then there's the rifle. My rifle. A dream I've harboured since boyhood, gazing at my father's old lass rifle mounted on our wall, always out of reach, always forbidden. I must keep my secret though, the fact that I'm not quite of age. The thought of being sent back to face my father's look is daunting. On the flight, I met a silo worker, Greggy, a cheerful soul a couple of years my senior. We shared stories and idle chatter, the journey feeling less tedious. Greggy showed me a faded pic of his family, wealthy by my standards, his mother draped in fine silk. It made me pull out the sole photograph of my parents looking youthful. I remember sneaking it out from my mother's hab. It's not just a photograph, it's a treasure, a link to my family that I vow to safeguard. As the Valk rattles on, I can't help but wonder if I'll encounter Greggy at the front. The comfort of a familiar face in the midst of war would be a solace. This journey marks not just a change in my life, but a step into a space far removed from the fields I know so well. 2 days at the front, and it feels like an eternity already. My bones ache, my arse groans, and I'm fairly sure I've caught a fever. Flabbergasted is the word. This place is nothing like what I imagined, and I'm not the only one. Half the new boys feel the same way. The moment we landed on the trenches, the horror of it hit us. We were all aghast, petrified. The conditions here are beyond anything I had in my worst dreams, bodies of the fallen everywhere, a true bloodbath. The thought has haunted me. Will I end up like them? Everyone is cramped together like vat rats. We've no room to move without knocking into someone. The rats are as giant as hounds. Greggy and I managed to spear 6 with our bayonets. Although they move so fast, they're just blurs. The gunfire echoes loudly, almost deafening at times, especially when a shot is fired close by. In trying to shoot the rats, I disturbed the others around me. One soldier, clearly annoyed, barked at me. "Oi! I'm trying to get some sleep here and I think you should too. Besides, wouldn't it be nice to have some time without those dreaded gunshots? Sleep is a luxury here, only possible during the day after we've completed our duties. We can't afford to sleep at night. Surprise attacks are more likely then. The dark is a cover for the enemy, and for us. I've never admitted it, but the dark terrifies me. I always fear a traitor soldier might suddenly pounce out of nowhere. Not even sure who we're fighting, to be honest. Our duties are backbreaking, some downright vile. These trenches, these dugout tunnels, are our only shield from the enemy and the land in between, yet they offer no respite from the rats and the lice, which I spend too much time picking. Every day here is a test of endurance, in a place that feels more like a grave than a battlefield. Last night, they attacked. Over 50 of our lads perished. Their bodies are lying across, in front of the trenches. By some stroke of luck, or the Emperor's protection, my sandbags bore the front of the attack instead of me, lasfire singing holes into the bags. There was no time to feel, though, no time to grieve for our brothers. We had more work to do. The defences were damaged in the assault. We need to replace them, more backbreaking work. Shovel, dirt, bag. Greggy and a vet called Jacobs were tasked with filling new bags under the sun, stacking the heavy bags one after another, leaving only small gaps to peer through for any signs of impending danger. Greggy's back was in agony by the end of the day. Mine isn't much better. Amidst the labour, a curious thought crossed my mind. What are the traitor trenches like? Are they as dreadful as ours? Or perhaps even worse? The thought lingered as we kept fortifying our position, preparing for whatever the next day might bring in this relentless war. Maybe we'll finally get to push over and have ourselves a visit to their trenches. Every day I look around me, and the landscape chips away at my mind. They told me this used to be part of a city. There's nothing but dirt and rubble around, for what seems like miles. I started to question why I signed up. One of the sergeants gave me a look that made me go quiet fairly quickly. These trenches are in a state of dread, draining the life out of us. We all bear the signs of fatigue now. Every part of me hurts, never-ending patrols and digging. I managed to write a note to my parents in a moment of quietness. Apologising for my absence from Sanguilia, the guilt of leaving weighs heavily on me. I miss everyone so much back home. I feel like I've betrayed their trust. I long to hear my family again, sitting here. I'm not so sure. I'm stuck here, in the mud and blood of this forsaken place. There's a gnawing feeling inside of me. A dreadful realisation that this war might just be endless. The likelihood of ever seeing my family again feels slim. And that's only if I'm fortunate enough to survive. Already, so many have fallen around me. Why didn't I heed the warnings of those who said not to join? It is better to die for the Emperor than to live for yourself. That's what they say, but seeing all this, I'm not sure I can believe it. As I write these words, the distant sounds of the enemy drift over from their trenches. Their laughter pierces the night, making me wonder if they're faring better than us in this hellhole. It's a strange thought, imagining an enemy experiencing a more bearable version of this nightmare. My gaze often drifts to Rook, one of my comrades. He's usually engrossed in his writings, his head bowed under the moonlight, pen moving over whatever spare paper he can get his hands on. But sometimes he pauses, staring blankly over the trench, lost in thoughts. Maybe remember a past life, or a future. When our eyes meet, his gaze looks through me, but I always sense pity and understanding. I think he knows I'm too young for this war. I try to avoid his gaze, but it's hard to escape the truth reflected in his eyes. At dawn, the boys of the 116th Artillery opened up a bombardment of the traitor positions. As the sun reached the sky, smoke was launched halfway down our line, but not in front of us. The Commissar reported after that the other division's attacks were satisfactory. They're doing the Emperor's work, so I'm told. Heavy fighting all over, but still not us. Hearing the fighting is worse when we can't see anything. In response, the enemy fired barrage after barrage of artillery and mortar fire. Everywhere my eyes dared to look today up and down the line, mounds of dirt spilt up with each whistle and bang. Heavy machine fire zipped over our heads, and still, the fighting was around us. But our line of trench remains mostly unharmed. After some hours, most of us were so used to the noise and chaos, we just got on with it. Don't think I'll ever forget this day quickly. It was like Ascension Day, but instead of bright-coloured sparks, It was murky, grey and brown. That's the only way I can describe it. Murky and loud. The day began like any other in the trenches, but a hellish tempest descended upon us as dusk fell. It was a sudden and brutal attack by traitors to the Imperium. Their war cry, a perversion of our holy chants, echoed through the air as they swarmed towards our line like a tide of corruption. The first sign of the assault was the piercing shriek of incoming artillery, the sound tearing. We scrambled to our positions. My heart was pounding as the sky lit up with the fire of explosions. The ground shook beneath us, each blast a reminder of the Emperor's foes at our doorstep. Then they came a horde of heretics, their armour a mockery of our own. I saw their faces, twisted by betrayal and hate, charging towards us with a fervour born of madness. We met them with lasgun fire, the crackle of energy bolts piercing the cacophony of battle. The air was thick with the stench of burning and the cries of the wounded. I fired my weapon until it was hot to the touch. With each pull of the trigger, I invoked the Emperor for strength. Next to me, Greggy fought with determination, his face a mask of resolve. We were no longer the naive boys who had joined the Guard. At that moment, we were warriors of the Imperium standing against the darkness. For moments this day, time slowed. A traitor loomed over me, nearly catching me, his blade raised for the killing strike. But then, Greggy, his face contorted in a battle rage I had never seen. We overpowered the traitor, our combined fury greater than his alone. I'll never forget that. He saved me. The battle raged on, but slowly the tide turned in our favour. The traitors, their initial momentum spent, began to falter under our relentless defence. We pushed them back, step by bloody step, until they were nothing but a retreating shadow in the night. As silence fell over the trench, we took stock of the cost. Bodies of friends and foes alike littered the ground, a grim testament to the price of our victory. I looked at Greggy, his uniform torn and stained, and saw my own exhaustion mirrored in his eyes. We had held the line, but at what cost? I feel a weariness in my soul, a deep-seated horror at the things I have seen and done. Yet amidst the despair there is pride. We stood against the Emperor's enemies, and we did not falter. Tonight, I write with a hand still trembling from battle, my thoughts a whirlwind of fear and relief. I pray for the souls of the fallen, that they may find peace in the Emperor's embrace. And I pray for myself that I may find the strength to face another day in this unending war, in service to the Emperor, Hamel Augustine. Tomorrow, they say, we go over the top. The trench, this muddy grave, will spew us forth into no man's land, where the Emperor's will is tested by fire and blood. I write these words with a tremor, from a fear I dare not voice aloud. It's hard to believe that just months ago, I was in the fields of my Hilaria, unaware of the horrors that lay beyond the stars. The recruiters' tales of glory and honour now seem like distant lies, swallowed by the barrage that nightly rocks our trench. Today, the sky was a bruised grey, the sun a smudge behind the clouds. It's as if even the heavens mourn in anticipation of tomorrow's bloodshed. We spent the day fortifying our position, the staccato rhythm of hammers a counterpoint to the distant artillery. The work was hard but welcome. It kept the mind from wandering to darker thoughts. Tonight, the trench is unusually quiet. The usual banter and bravado have given way to a sombre reflection. Each man is an island, lost in his thoughts. I see it in their eyes, the same fear that gnaws at my heart. We are but young men, many of us barely past our boyhood, yet the weight of the galaxy rests on our shoulders. I spoke with Greggy today. He tried to sound upbeat, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. We reminisced about the simple joys we took for granted. For a moment, we were back there, away from the mud and the blood and the endless war, but reality has a cruel way of intruding, and our laughter soon died in our throats. I think of my family often, of mother and father. As I lay down to snatch a few hours of restless sleep, I can't help but wonder about tomorrow. Will I be brave? The chaplain says the Emperor watches over us, that we are his instruments of justice. I want to believe that. I need to think that. If this is to be my last entry, let it be known that I served with honour, that I did my duty as best I could. And if by some twist of fate I survive, I shall write again, to bear witness to the heroism that all my brothers displayed.
The sky was dark, and he knew he was dying. Alone and frightened, unable to stand or even move his legs, he lay on his back in the frozen mud of no man's land. Lay there helpless, his body shrouded in darkness, eyes gazing up at the nighttime sky overhead, as though trying to read some portent of his future in the cold, distant stars. Tonight, the stars kept their own counsel. Tonight, the bleak and foreboding heavens held no comfort. How long has it been now, he thought. How many hours? Finding no answer to his question, he turned his head to look out at the scenery about him, hoping at last to see some sign of rescue, but there was nothing. No movement in the darkness, no cause for hope. Around him, the bleak expanses of no man's land lay still and silent. A landscape rendered featureless by the hand of night, painted black with threatening shadows, holding nothing that spoke to his hopes or could even help him to find his bearings. He was lost and alone, abandoned to a world of darkness, with no prospect of help or salvation. For a moment it seemed to him he might as well be the last man left alive in the entire galaxy. Then, the thought of it gave him cause for fear, and he quickly put it from his mind. How long now? He thought again. How many hours? He had felt nothing when the bullet struck him. There was no pain, no agony, nor even anguish, just a strange and sudden numbness in his legs as he slid toward the ground. At first, not understanding what had happened, he had thought he had tripped, until, cursing himself for his clumsiness, he had tried to rise only to find his legs curiously unresponsive. It was then, as he felt the spreading warmth of his blood seeping across his belly, that he had realized his mistake. In the hours since, unable to see the extent of his wounds in the darkness, he had used his probing fingers to tell him what his eyes could not. He had been hit at the base of the spine, the bullet leaving a fist-sized hole at the front of his stomach as it exited his body. Treating his wounds to the best of his medical knowledge, he had stuffed them with gauze to stem the bleeding and placed dressings over them. Though there were phials of morphia in his guard-issue medpack, and he had learned the prayer of relief from torment by heart, he had no need for them. There was no pain from his wounds. Even when his probing fingers had slid past the knuckle into the ragged hole in his stomach, he had felt no physical discomfort. He did not need to be possessed of any great medical knowledge to know that was not a good sign. How long now? The question came to his mind again, unbidden. How many hours? There were other discomforts, though. The chill of the cold night air biting at the exposed skin of his face and neck, a terrible mind-wearying fatigue that made his thoughts seem dull and leaden. The fear, the loneliness, the isolation. Worst of all, there was the silence. When first he had fallen wounded, the night had thundered with all the cacophony of battle, the high-pitched whine of lasguns, the crack of slug-throwers, the roar of explosions, the screams and cries of the wounded and the dying. Sounds that gradually subsided, growing slowly more distant before finally giving way to silence. He would never have thought a man could draw comfort from such sounds. As terrifying as the clamor of battle had been, the quiet that followed was worse. It compounded his isolation, leaving him alone with all his fears. Here, in the darkness, fear had become his constant companion, plaguing his heart without remorse or respite. How long now? The question would not leave him. How many hours? At times the compulsion came over him to cry out, to shout for help, to beg for mercy, to scream, to yell, to pray. Anything to break that dreadful silence. Every time it came, he fought it with all his strength, biting his lip hard to stop the words from spilling out. He knew that to make even the slightest sound would only be to bring death upon him all the sooner. for though his comrades might hear him, so would the enemy. Somewhere, out there on the other side of no man's land, the enemy waited in their countless millions. Waited, ever eager to fight, to maim, to kill. No matter how terrifying it was to be trapped alone and wounded in no man's land, the thought of being found by the enemy was worse. For what seemed like hours now, he had endured the silence, knowing that as desperately as he might hope for rescue, he could do nothing to speed it on its way towards him. How long now, the thought pounded insistently in his head. How many hours? There was so little left to him now, so little of real substance. All the things that had once meant so much, his family, his homeworld, his faith in the Emperor, now seemed dim and distant. Even his memories were insubstantial, as though his past was fading away before his eyes as swiftly as was his future. His inner world, the world of his life which had once seemed so full and bright with promise, had been diminished and reduced by circumstance. He was left with only a few simple choices: to cry out or keep his silence, to bleed to death or take his knife and end it quickly, to stay awake or fall asleep. At the moment, sleep seemed a tempting prospect. He was tired and bone-weary, fatigue pulling at his sluggish mind like an insistent friend, but he would not yield to it. He knew if he fell asleep now, he would likely never awaken. Just as he knew that all these so-called choices were simply illusions. In the end, there was only one stark choice left to him now: to live or to die, and he refused to die. How long now? The question again. Relentless. How many hours? But there was no answer. Resigning himself to the thought that his fate was now in the hands of others, he waited in the silence of no man's land. Waited, hoping that somewhere out in the night, his comrades were already searching for him. Waited, refusing to give in or fall asleep. He waited, caught between life and death. His life was a last fitful burning spark lost amid a sea of darkness, his mind wondering how it was he had ever come to be there at all.